Hey guys, it's Kate, and I hope you're having a great day today. I'm doing something a little bit different with a acrylic painting that I am using a photo reference that I found on unsplash.com, which has lots of free photos. If you'd like to join along with me, I'll be linking it in the description below. But I'm starting off with the colors that I listed, and these are just acrylic paints from Creative Inspirations and also some Liquitex, but you can use whatever you have on hand. And I think I didn't end up using the ultramarine blue, so if you want to skip that, you can. I used pretty much mostly the Prussian blue for my mixing because it made a really nice turquoise since it's a cool color. So I'm mixing up that with the lemon yellow and some of my titanium white and a little bit of black for the darker areas. And I'm just going around first and blocking in whereabouts my flower is. So I'm going to be doing a purple lotus flower, and it's really beautiful in the photograph. It's got a lot of darks and some nice highlights, but I really love the combination of the dark bluish background with the purple and red of the flower. So I'm just kind of mapping things out to start with. I'm mixing colors as I go, and I'm kind of varying the lightness and darkness as I go around. If you look at the photo reference, you'll see some very light areas in comparison and then very dark shadows in the bottom. So for this first layer, I'm just getting really loose with my brush. I'm not hiding any brush strokes. As a matter of fact, I'm really emphasizing them. And I'm just kind of doing sort of like X shapes or V shapes. Think Bob Ross if you've watched him. And then I'm going lighter on the right hand side. But as I'm looking back and forth between my paper and the photo reference that I have off camera, I am just kind of mapping in the location of where some of those petal areas are. So if you're looking at the photo and you look at kind of that cup in the bottom of the flower, the top half of it, it's about 2/3 of the way down the picture. So on my paper, I'm going to make sure that it's kind of in the middle and about 2/3 down my page. And then I'm going to have my side petals come in closer to the center and just go from there. So I'm just using my brush to loosely block in the shapes, and then I'm going around with the colors. And I like the variation in the blue-green, just going from dark to light, and I make adjustments as I go, and I like the variation a lot. So it ends up being kind of an interesting background by the time we finish the painting. I am speeding this up today, but I think altogether the painting took me about an hour and a half or so. Maybe an hour and 20 minutes. So I let the blue background dry a bit, and so I mixed up some of my purple colors and made it pretty dark, and now I'm blocking in some of my petals. And I'm trying to mostly go dark to white for this painting, or dark to light, I should say, for this painting. So I'm trying to mostly stick to that, although I'm sure I go outside of that rule a few times when I find something that I want to make sure to cover. And I do find some areas where I want to block in some more of that turquoise as I start to tighten up my flower shape, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. So right now I'm going around, I'm trying to kind of map out where each of those petals are, following the lines where I see them, and letting it be a nice thick line where there might be a shadow. And anywhere there might be a dark shadow on the flower, I'm definitely filling in some extra color with that really dark purple with some black added. So I'm going in and adding some more shadows at the top and still kind of tightening up that flower shape, adding in some more blended colors and those couple of smaller petals, or not even so much smaller, but they're the petals that would be kind of facing you if you were holding the camera, and I'm just kind of adding those in and then filling in with some extra color where those petals are. And this is going to have a lot of layers by the end. I wanted to just really experiment with my shapes and hues, and so I want to make sure I have a lot of layers and a lot of mixed colors so that there's a lot of variation. I'm kind of going for, I guess, a little bit of abstract or a little bit of impressionism here. I really love that style of art personally, so this is good practice for me to get a little bit better at that and to practice, um, you know, painting from photos. I don't think I'll ever be one to do the hyper detail, and as beautiful as that is, I just really like the more abstract process personally, so that's what I tend to gravitate to. So I'm going in with a base color, mixing that purple lake and that pink. I think it's a quinacridone rose, I believe. And I'm blocking in more of those petal shapes and getting them more tightened up. And I like how it's kind of layering with that darker purple color in the background. And it's more of kind of a lighter mid-tone. And if you look at the picture, you have the redness that's in that flower center, but also I really, really loved that same redness that kind of shines through in some of the shadowy areas of the lower petals. So that was one thing I really tried to concentrate on for this painting. And so I'm not really worrying right now about adding in shadows and highlights. I just want to try to get the shapes as close as I can. And now I'm adding in some more of that turquoise to that left side and some of the other areas just to really hone in on those petal shapes. And as different areas of the painting dry, I kind of move on to another spot so that I don't really have to stop in the middle. And if you notice when I'm adding in my turquoise and kind of tightening up those shapes, I am blending that out a bit into the turquoise around it so that I have kind of a multi-layered effect, but also so it doesn't look like it's just sort of an outline or a blob slapped down right there on the page. So I'm feathering out where I can just to make sure that since I'm mixing the colors on my plate, they're always going to be slightly different than the original I put down. So I'm just going to make sure to blend everything in. And as I continue blending, the parts of the page will continue to get a little bit darker where those darker blue areas are. And so now I'm adding in that beautiful red that's in some of those petals. And I'm just going back and forth between the camera, or I'm sorry, between my painting and the picture, And I'm adding in just a touch here and there, just to give that as sort of an undertone. So I'm going to paint over a lot of that again, but you'll still see some of that hue coming through, which I really like at the end. And it's helping to further differentiate the petals. And so I'm kind of looking at the picture right now, and all of those undersides of the petals that are much darker, I'm trying to add those in and follow the shape that is in the photo. And I'm going to end the painting with my brightest highlights, the white areas toward the center. One thing that really amazes me sometimes is when you just kind of start with these paint blobs and then you add a line here or there, add a highlight, and all of a sudden it starts to become a real thing. And it's so exciting when that happens. And for me, I think it first started happening when I started adding in the shadows on the sides of the petals. They became more like 3D objects instead of just, a pink shape. And it really makes a big difference when you're focusing on just adding the right values. And, you can use a photo reference, and that is just fine to do. And as you get more familiar with it, you start to get a little bit of natural intuition on, if you were going to draw something from, let's say, your imagination. So I think learning about these things and practicing them is really valuable for when you're working on other things, maybe without a reference, or just drawing from life and just making sure that you're adding in those shadows and highlights. It really does make a world of difference. And then just paying attention to color too. And this painting was so fun to do, and it's such good practice. So I really hope that if you're watching this, you grab your paints and follow along. It's just something that's really satisfying if you just sit down and really try. I'm not really a illustrator and don't draw a lot, but when you just start mapping out the blocks, it helps me a lot to place things, and it ends up being fairly accurate for the most part. I mean, I have a lot of trouble with seems like faces and hands and things like that, so that's something I'd like to practice too. But the florals are a lot of fun, so I think I'm going to do some more of these. I've also really enjoyed doing some of the florals in the watercolor videos that I've posted, so I hope that you enjoy this one in acrylic too. And it's something that's accessible. You don't need a lot of supplies or stamps or stencils or anything. Just a couple of brushes that you like and some of your favorite colors. And you can even get creative with your colors. I think my finished painting here turned out a little bit pinker than the one in the picture, but I'm totally fine with that. So I'm deepening up some of the colors in the petals, making the darks even darker where they need to be, going back and forth from the photo to my painting. And I'm not worrying about highlights yet. I want to get my shadows in and get them kind of mapped out, because that will kind of tell me where my highlights need to be later. and I can really work on that contrast. And I'm just kind of working my way around the flower so that the parts I last worked on have a chance to dry, and I can just keep continuing with the painting. So I'm adding in some of the lighter areas here, but I'm not quite at my white highlights yet. So I'm just trying to see in the photo where the light is hitting the most, and it's mostly sort of in that lower left hand part of the flower. And so I'm making sure that I get that differentiation in the front petal versus the back one. There's a little bit more shadow on the front that you can see where some more light hits that back one. And then over to the right side, I want to definitely get that curl in the petal. And I'm kind of fixing that line between the flower and the blue background. So I'm just really focusing on defining those edges. And I'm not worried about brush strokes or anything like that. I actually really like the brush strokes, and to me, it adds a little bit of interest to the painting. And I remember sitting here while I was painting thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is actually turning out. I really like this a lot. And I can't wait to take the tape off of the paper. And so I'm just really looking around, and I'm starting to kind of finalize some of those shadows and highlights. And I haven't added my pure white yet. That'll go on very last, which is right now. So I'm adding that in. I found my brightest areas, which is that one petal that I just painted, the one I'm painting now, and that one sort of toward the left. And so I want to get some of that clean white in there. I'm just making sure I've got all of my pinks and purples where they need to go. I'm adding some purple in a few of the areas where to me there was just a little bit too much red, And so I'm just toning that down a bit. I want that red to mostly come through in that bottom petal and a little bit over to the left. And then I'm spending a little bit of time in that center cluster. And I just want to give sort of those hints of shadows and separation, but I'm not getting too detailed with it. Because if you look at the picture, there are a lot of little lines and veins in the petals, and I'm not worrying about that for this painting. I just want to get those basic shapes and the colors and values. And looking back, I think there's maybe a couple of things that I might have kept working on or did a little bit differently, but as I'm putting on these final highlights, I'm just really, really happy with how this painting turned out overall. I just kind of was scrolling through Unsplash one day and I found this picture that I really liked, so I wanted to try painting it, and I'm so glad that it turned into something that I could post. So I'm taking off my tape and then I'll be able to show you a close-up of the painting, but if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or leave me a comment if you have any feedback for me. And I hope that you joined along or that you'll try something like this on your own with another photo. And until next time, keep creating.